The Democratic brand is toxic right now.
Well, this sounds all very good, but Governor, you were the poster boy for a lot of this stuff.
This hyper-woke Democrat is trying to rebrand as moderate, but even his own side isn't buying it. We're going to break down California Governor Gavin Newsom's appearance on the Bill Maher show, plus Trump floats a third-term option, and a viral dine-and-dash story breaks the internet. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across our media, our politics, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned at the top, we got to talk about Gavin Newsom, because this snake oil salesman, this Democratic politician who's still the governor of California and is now rebranding as like a new podcast host and talking across the aisle and trying to come across as moderate. Well, he went on Bill Maher's show. And Bill, you probably know him. He's a liberal comedian who hosts a show for HBO. I really like his show. He's still solidly liberal, but he kind of criticizes the woke insanity, but also pushes back on Trump a lot. If anything, he's like totally anti-Trump beyond the point of reason. But I like Bill. He's basically stayed true to his values. He's funny. He talks to all sorts of different people, including this week, Gavin Newsom. And their exchange really put on full display how Newsom is trying to rebrand as this like moderate. Take a listen to this first bit.
I mean, this idea that we can't even have a conversation with the other side.
You have to. They won.
Thank you. That's it. Bottom line. And by the way, or the notion we just have to continue to talk to ourselves, or we're in the same damn echo chamber. These guys are crushing us. The Democratic brand is toxic right now. We had a high water mark 2 weeks ago, and that was a CNN poll at 29% favorability. It's dropped in the NBC poll down to 27%. It's one thing to make noise, but you also have to make sense. And I think with this podcast and having the opportunity to dialogue with people I disagree with, it's an opportunity to try to find common ground and not take cheap shots. I'm not looking to put a spoke in the wheel of their, or at least a crowbar in the spokes of their wheel to trip them up, to your point. And I think it's important. Democrats, we tend to be a little more judgmental than we should be. This notion of cancel culture, you've been living it. You've been on the receiving end of it for years and years and years. That's real. And Democrats need to own up to that. They've got to mature about this.
So this is kind of maddening, because he almost sounds like he gets it when he talks about how toxic and judgmental the Democratic Party brand has been, constantly policing everyone's minor word choice, scolding people, this kind of hectoring vibe that absolutely is radioactive for progressives and Democrats and has been. He almost sounds like he's getting it. And I do appreciate his message about speaking across the aisle and talking to people who disagree with you. That, I think, is totally valid. But again, I'm just struck by the fact that, as Bill Maher will quickly go on to point out, he is the prototypical Democrat who was all in on all of this stuff. The most glaring example was recently CNN, yes, CNN, called out Gavin Newsom for the fact that he crapped all over Latinx, the imaginary gender-neutral form of Latino and Latina that Democrats and progressives pushed a few years back. And Gavin Newsom says, like, that's ridiculous, which it was. Basically, all Latino people rejected it out of hand, and this kind of laughed off this woke attempt to colonize their language, basically. He claimed, no one in my office ever used Latinx, but he literally did himself. This was so glaring, CNN fact-checked him on it.
By the way, not one person ever in my office has ever used the word Latinx.
So can we finally put that to bed?
Yeah,
we agree?
where did that even
No
go?
more Latinx, everybody.
Well, I just didn't even know where it came from. I'm like, what are people talking about?
But there was a person who used Latinx. It was actually a really important person. It was him. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And look, these aren't minor shifts. These are progressive issues that Gavin Newsom used to champion until fairly recently. And now he's not just walking away from them. He's sort of acting like they were never legitimate with that clip talking about Latinx in the first place. But let's take Latinx. We did find somebody who used it repeatedly in his office. Let's take a listen to this.
I hope we can really paint a picture in terms of our consciousness of how impactful this has been on the Latinx community. The Latinx and Black communities. You've got politicians that are banning not assault rifles, but the word Latinx. They're not even serious.
And that's just one example, but it really does feel like this moderate pivot on Gavin Newsom is more cynical than it is honest, because he is the guy who's been the face of all this extreme stuff in California, and that's what Bill Maher pointed out. Take a listen to the rest of this clip.
So what do you say to people who say, well, this sounds all very good, but Governor, you were the poster boy for a lot of this stuff. I see today the Trump administration they talked about, I don't know if this is true, but they talked about the fact that California had a rule that schools cannot be required to notify parents if their kids in school have changed their gender, their pronouns. That's the kind of thing, even though it doesn't affect a lot of people, that makes a lot of people go, well, you know what? That's the party without common sense. Now, if that's your state, how are you?
Well, I just disagree with that. I mean, the law was you would be fired. A teacher would be fired if a teacher did not report or snitch on a kid talking about their gender identity. I just think that was wrong. I think teachers should teach. I don't think they should be required to turn in kids. And by the way,
we're talking about their parents. How can you snitch? The idea of a snitch and a parent to me doesn't compute.
Well, I don't. But what is the job of a teacher? It's to teach. If Johnny's talking about some identity issue or some issue about liking someone of the same sex, is the teacher's job to then report that? By the way, in this law, the teacher can still do that, but they can't be fired if that's it can't be fired if that's not what they do. And that's something I think I just think that was fair.
So this got a little bit muddled. So I want to clarify exactly what we're talking about here. But Gavin Newsom is moderate Gavin Newsom is maintaining support for a position he had and a law that he signed into law in California that prohibited local school districts from passing rules requiring teachers to inform parents if their kid announced a new gender identity or started using different pronouns. So basically in California, conservative school boards at the local level wanted to institute these rules and say, listen, if a kid comes out as non-binary or transgender in class, teachers have to inform the parents. Gavin Newsom stepped in and with the state legislature overrode that and prohibited those policies. So what he's saying is, well, if a teacher chose to, they could still inform the parents, but school boards can't require it. And he's bizarrely framing parents being informed about serious developments with their child's mental and social health as snitching. Here's more about this law from the New York Times. The California law, known as the Safety Act, prevents school boards from requiring staff members to tell parents when a student asks to use a different name or pronoun. It was the first law of its kind when Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, signed it in July, and it went into effect on January 1st. The act came after more than a dozen conservative-led school boards tried to mandate parental notification. California's law does not prohibit conversations about gender identity between school staff members and parents, but it does prevent schools from adopting policies requiring disclosure. Now, I talked about this law on my channel way back when it happens, and I strongly believe that local school boards should be allowed and should require parents to be informed by teachers when a student talks about their mental health and their gender identity and their pronouns and these kinds of things, with perhaps a narrow exception for when the teacher very credibly with evidence believes that informing parents would put the child's physical safety at risk. That's a rare outlier example they often use to justify this kind of thing, but I don't deny that that probably does happen in some situations, so we should probably account for it in some way. Though honestly, if you feel that a child is unsafe, if you tell their parent basic information about what's going on with them, you probably already should be reporting them to child services in some form or another. But yes, it is common sense that parents should be notified if their kid announces a new gender identity. You are literally talking about something that, even according to the left, even according to trans activists, comes with serious mental health ramifications. And, as they point out, increased risk of self-harm. And yet you're not going to tell parents that? Or you're going to tell school boards that it should be up to the teacher whether they feel like sharing that information with the teacher. We can't force them to snitch. That's insane. And it's not moderate at all. He may be packaging it in this kind of, I'm a reasonable guy, new brand that he's rolling out there. But it's so interesting that that when it comes to the actual substance of the policy position, he hasn't shifted an inch. He's still defending the same radical progressive idea that people find alienating in the first place. Americans overwhelmingly disagree with this kind of policy and believe in parental rights and are very skeptical of gender transitioning children at all, let alone secretly in schools. So to see this put on 4K, I thought Bill Maher did a really good job of kind of luring out, Gavin Newsom, tell us more about how you're a moderate now and you're so open-minded and nuanced. Okay, but now this crazy thing you did, you stand by it, right? Well, yes, I do. The jig is up. We know the truth, and that Gavin Newsom's rebrand is not remotely authentic. I will say that it does to some extent appear to still be working. He is a charismatic guy. He is a powerful political figure. And I think he could mount a serious and compelling presidential campaign. But I'm telling you now, do not believe for a second that his transformation is motivated by anything other than ambition and political convenience. But what do you guys think? Did you have the same takeaway from this Bill Maher segment? And do you like Bill Maher's show more generally? It's one of my favorite things in liberal media that I still do watch. Let me know in the comments. I do take the time to read the comments. I love hearing what you guys have to say. Do hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Up next, Trump is seriously considering a third term as president? Yeah, that's what reporters are saying. Trump just informed them. Take a listen to Kristen Welker from NBC explaining a conversation she had with the president.
President Trump called me this morning. We discussed a range of topics, including the possibility of him serving a third term. He's joked about it.
I've raised a lot of money for the next race that I assume I can't use for myself, but I'm not 100% sure.
But these were his most extensive comments yet. He told me he's not joking. He said there are methods by which you could do it, but he said it's far too early to think about it. He said he's focused on his current job. At the same time, I did press him on those methods. There's been some discussion about the possibility of Vice President J.D. Vance running perhaps at the top of the ticket with President Trump running in the number 2 slot and then swapping if they were to win. President Trump telling me that is a method. He said there are other methods. I asked if he could give me details, and he said flatly, no. Now, President Trump's allies have said that they are seriously looking at this.
We're working on there. We're not prepared to talk about it publicly, but in a couple of months, I think we will be.
Here's what you need to know, though. It is incredibly complicated to change the Constitution. Serving a third term is prohibited by the Constitution. So this is something that would be far out of reach by any measure. And again, President Trump insisting for right now, he's focused on his current job.
Hey, so this is bizarre. First and foremost, Trump just seems confused because Kristen Welker released the transcript of their phone call. And if it's all true, and I do, look, I mistrust the media as much as anyone. I find it hard to believe that NBC News would release a false transcript. So I am proceeding under the operation or the assumption that it is true. And under that assumption, Trump seems incredibly confused if he thinks that it's even an option that he could run as vice president for a third term and then JD could be president and then they could swap. No, you're ineligible to be vice president if you've already served 2 terms as president because, and this is plainly written, you have to be eligible to be president, to be vice president, and you're not eligible to be president under the 22nd Amendment if you've already served and been elected to 2 terms. This is very plainly written, and it's kind of alarming that Trump wouldn't know this basic fact about how our Constitution works. More importantly, this is such a massive distraction that literally no one asked for. I mean, maybe a few diehard Trump fanboys are like, yes, please, we must have a third term. But guys, he'll be really old by then. He's already not exactly a spring chicken or a paragon of health. I mean, he had a Diet Coke button installed in the Oval Office. Indulging this, joking about it, discussing it as if it's a remotely serious or legitimate possibility doesn't help MAGA beat the cult allegations. Like, it really does make Trump Republicans look crazy when a lot of them are not. A lot of them are normal Americans, and a lot of them don't even want this, okay? It's just a total distraction from whatever he could be pointing to or talking about that actually might happen, that might help people, that might be productive. Instead, Trump and his allies are encouraging this utter delulu. Why? No one wants this. America doesn't want kings. We have the term limits for the presidency for a reason. And remember, guys, if Trump could have a third term, then that means a future president AOC could too. Shoe's always going to be on the other foot at some point. The only way this could ever happen that would be remotely legal or constitutional would be if they literally amended the Constitution to change or alter or get rid of the requirement in the 22nd Amendment that you can only serve 2 terms. And that is an extensive process that requires you to get a 2/3 vote in Congress, never going to happen, and then 3/4 of the states have to ratify that amendment. Also, never going to happen. There's only one way to even go about this, and that way is essentially impossible given basic political reality. So the entire thing just comes off as crazy and a distraction. Of course, liberal media outlets love it because it gives them the fodder they want to paint Trump as if he's like this dictator and he's this terrible guy who wants to cling on to power. And it would be pretty easy to not feed into that narrative by simply saying, no, I'm not going to run for a 3rd term ever. That's completely off the table. I respect the Constitution. And anyway, I'll be really old and I just want to spend time with my grandkids. And we'll see who comes next. We got stuff to focus on now. That's literally all you'd have to say to avoid this calamity of a news cycle. But sometimes Trump and his friends, they just can't help themselves. What do you guys think? Are you as exacerbated by this story as I am? Do let me know in the comments. Up next, these trashy dine-and-dashers just victimized an innocent waitress and bragged about it on social media. Take a listen to this really disturbing story that to me just speaks volumes about the degradation of our culture and our society.
Days ago, 3 women from Rochester, New York were here in Chicago to celebrate a birthday and left behind one heck of a surprise. They decided to dine and dash after greasing their fingers on chicken wings, eating Alfredo, and washing it all down with flights of drinks.
Now you see them and now you don't. We've blurred the video because the trio hasn't been charged yet, but you can't miss that distinctive blue wig and the massive tab they left behind.
Not the blue wig. And did they really not realize there were going to be cameras? People actually think they can just do this kind of thing and get away with it? Honestly, the news station is being nice by blurring them because if y'all have them on tape, I would show it. But guys, the story gets so much worse.
The server went to the table. They asked for the ticket to be split. She left from this table behind me to a few steps away, clicked the button. As she left, they got up one at a time and walked out.
3 days ago, the 3 women from Rochester, New York visited Soul Vibes in the Near North neighborhood to celebrate a birthday and left behind a surprise, an unpaid tab of over $200.
They actually ran out the door and ran and hid behind a service vehicle that was in traffic.
They decided to dine and dash after devouring chicken wings, Alfredo, and washing it all down with flights of drinks.
It's not violent, but it's a crime, and it affects us, and it affects our bottom dollar, and it affects our team members.
Yeah, this is such nasty behavior, and guys, we haven't even got to the craziest part yet, but it's so nasty to do this kind of thing. You are screwing over. First off, you're just stealing. You don't have a right to take people, services and their food and their time and their money and just steal from them. You're a thief and you are stealing, and it is degenerate behavior. But more broadly, honestly, I struggle to imagine a bigger red flag than someone who dines and dashes. If I met you or we went on a date and you mentioned that you did that, and not like, oh, I did this when I was a kid and I'm so embarrassed about it, but that's something you still do or think is okay, immediate red flag, massive character flaw. Thank you. Next. You're instantly deleted from my life. I really have no more interest in getting to know you as a person after that, because you're victimizing an innocent waitress whose time and labor you just stole, and then she's not getting paid. Some restaurants make them pay it back themselves, and regardless, you're screwing over a small business in many cases, trying to just get away with a free lunch. I just think it's horrible. But these particular criminals are also incredibly stupid, as you will most certainly hear in the rest of this coverage.
They were spotted on surveillance, leaving one by one within 30 seconds of the server stepping away. They also forgot that they signed up on the wait list before being seated, including their name and phone number. And to add insult to injury, they posted this onto social media, thanking the restaurant for the free food while laughing at waitstaff like Chloe Jackson.
Seriously? Y'all are that nasty and that dumb? That's a double whammy, honestly. They signed up for the wait list with their name and information and then dine and dashed. Y'all, if you're gonna do crime, at least don't make it that obvious. The level of stupidity required to do that is astounding. And then the audacity. Again, in this country, we have an epidemic of audacity. The audacity to tag the restaurant on social media, post the meal, and say thanks for the free food. Y'all are wild for that. Y'all are demented for that. And y'all deserve every bit of karma and accountability that I sure hope is coming your way. But unfortunately, we have reason to doubt that it actually will.
I'm here 3 days a week.
Their greedy crime comes with a much heavier cost.
Some places do make the servers come out and pay for those bills, but Fab and Soul Vibes here, they don't make us pay for it. Well, that's really grateful because $300, $400 could really break our bank for that day.
Sadly, Dine and Dash incidents are on the rise. The owners run 2 Soul Vibes locations and 3 I Can't Believe It's Not Meat restaurants. And in the last 6 months, they've seen an uptick in these type of incidents. These are just a few of the incidents they've recorded.
It's an industry of pennies and nickels. So when you get these dine and dash incidences, you know what I mean? You know, the consumer or the people that are doing this dine and dash might think, oh, it's just $100. Yeah, but it's hurting the bottom line.
Now, a police report was made. Chicago police are now investigating. If charged, the suspects could face a Class A misdemeanor for theft of services under the amount of $500. That's punishable by up to 1 year in jail and a $2,500 fine.
Good! Lock these people up. Lock her up. Yes, I'm talking about you, Miss Blue Wig. Unfortunately, though, it sounds like it's just a misdemeanor, and even in those cases, the full accompanying jail sentence is not typically or not always imposed. I really do think you should be sent to jail for doing something like this. It is socially corrosive. You are harming your neighbors, and it just sends such a degenerate signal to the rest of society if we allow this kind of behavior, if we tolerate this kind of antisocial action, especially when it is so brazen and so blatant and so laced with idiocy at every turn. Y'all have to pay for this. You didn't want to pay for this, so now y'all have to pay for this, if you ask me. But like any big city, I don't have a whole lot of confidence that misdemeanor violations will be thoroughly prosecuted and investigated. However, maybe the media attention this one is getting might help. When there's a spotlight, they're more likely to actually do their jobs. I hope that's the case, but even then I can't be sure. I'm more interested in this because I think it speaks to a broader problem with our society. Like, imagine what has to be broken with your culture and with the internet that anyone would think they could post online onto social media, thanks for the free food, and tag the restaurant they just stole from. And they would only post such a thing if they assumed the response from their followers or from the world would be mostly positive, right? They're not going to take the risk of admitting to a crime on Instagram just when they think everyone's going to hit them with hate and pushback. Obviously, they must think, oh, everyone's going to find this hilarious, or everyone's going to be like slay queen. And the sad part is, I don't know about everyone, but at least some people probably are like that and were like that. And that's what I worry about. Stealing is trashy behavior. Stealing is embarrassing. Stealing is crusty. But like, especially in Gen Z circles, there is just not enough stigma attached to it anymore. And that's a serious problem, if you ask me. I want to see Miss Blue Hair in a jail cell. That will make my day, okay? But until that happens, I guess we'll leave it there for that one. Up next, this Trump advisor just said something kind of insane on live television. Take a listen.
The president says he doesn't care if the prices go up on U.S. cars. So what's the message to the U.S. consumer?
The message is that tariffs are tax cuts, tariffs are jobs, tariffs are national security, tariffs are great for America, tariffs will make America great again.
It's giving Orwell. It's giving 1984. Tariffs are new taxes. imposed on American businesses that are importing things from other countries and then passed along to American consumers. New taxes cannot be a tax cut. You are holding up 4 fingers and then telling us to say we see 5. You can argue for tariffs. I'll disagree with you. We can have a back and forth. But like, don't gaslight us. Don't lie. I mean, they're also claiming that these tariffs will raise hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue, but also they're a tax cut. The math isn't mathing. Y'all sound delulu. Now, you could argue, this is a White House trade advisor, you could argue, listen, tariffs are a new tax we're going to put that, yes, Americans will in part have to pay for, but then we'll use that revenue to cut other taxes. I would still disagree with that because I think tariffs have harmful economic impacts and shrink the economy and hurt jobs and other things, but that would at least be a self-sustaining, internally consistent position to take. Do not insult our intelligence and get before the American people and tell us new taxes are a tax cut. It's not true, and it makes you seem delusional or incredibly condescending. Either way, it is not a great look for Trump's team to be going out and making the case for his tariffs like this. Up next, this woke TikTok influencer almost gets it.
So words like bigot, racist, homophobe, transphobe don't really land the way that they used to because people have become very comfortable being those things thanks to what is happening in the world today. You know?
For a second, I almost thought he was about to get it, and then he did the opposite and totally missed the point entirely. No, dude, the reason people don't take accusations of bigotry as seriously anymore is because progressives and woke people threw them around like candy on Halloween for years. They cried wolf so many times that these words and these accusations, they lost their power, they lost their effect. It's not that people all suddenly love racism now, it's that y'all claimed that Aunt Jemima syrup was racist. By the way, bring back Aunt Jemima. She got done so dirty during the woke craze. But this guy decided to double down on the condescending elitism in the rest of the video.
So instead of getting into an argument with someone who is clearly not looking to be evolved, all you need to do is go, oh, you're unevolved, and leave it at that. People who are being that don't like being called that.
So the people who disagree with you are just unevolved humans. The arrogance, the lack of intellectual humility is off the charts with this one. The examples he gave made this even worse.
You don't believe that trans people should exist? Unevolved. You don't believe that women should have equal rights? Unevolved. You don't believe that queer people should have the right to marry who they love? Unevolved. You don't believe in diversity, equity, inclusivity? Unevolved. You want to make America great again by going backwards? Because you're unevolved and incapable of moving forward with change where you now have to grow your thinking. Say it with me. Unevolved.
So Mans here really just flew through a quick hits of like complex social, philosophical, theological, and political debates like abortion and claimed all of one side is just unevolved humans. Yes, because you, an Instagram influencer, just have all the divine wisdom to know the truth about all these complicated issues, and actually they're just simple and it's good people versus bad people. Do you hear yourself? You sound like a mental toddler. But guys, this is all just part of his love army.
If you're new here, welcome to our love army. Much love, y'all.
That's right. This dude calls his followers the love army, although he smears everyone that disagrees with him as an unevolved human and condescendingly wraps up the greatest hits of the most complicated and divisive political issues as if they're all as simple as good guys versus bad guys. Is the love in the room with us? Because all I'm seeing is arrogance and condescension, which sadly makes this about par for the course for woke influencers these days. What do you guys think? Have you seen this guy's content before? Do let me know in the comments. All right, everybody, that'll be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed. If you aren't yet, do hit that like button before you go, and we'll talk again real soon.